Isn't that a little strange that she's literally disappeared for a whole week? Her family don't even know she's alive, and now she's just like, hey everyone, I'm in Indiana. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Philpott and I cover true crime cases on my channel. The case we're talking about this week was actually supposed to be one of the mini missing person cases where I would try to get the face of the person out and the name of the person out, and there's not really supposed to be a whole lot of information on them. But then I started looking into it. Oh, there is so much more than meets the eye with this case. Now, there is a lot of hearsay, there is a lot that's rumoured that we don't necessarily know to be true, but due to the fact that law enforcement haven't really confirmed a whole lot publicly, it's led people to question this whole case even more, which in turn has led to more and more theories. This is a very risky lip colour to be wearing, and the camera is too far away where I'm not going to know if it's on my teeth, so I do apologise. Also, I do just want to say before I get into it, if any of the information I've provided is incorrect in some way, I do apologise, particularly with this case because it was incredibly difficult to fact check. A lot of the sources are just like, oh, well, I heard this and I heard that, and you hear these things time and time again and it makes it seem like something is true, and maybe it was never even confirmed by the actual law enforcement or the actual mainstream media. So yeah, I do apologize if anything is inaccurate. I have really tried my best though to confirm the pieces of information that I'm going to be sharing with you. Also, I had a number of, not complaints, more just inquiries about where my co-host has been. By the way, if you're new here, this is Sandy, my dog. She's right beside me, but she doesn't really like to sit on the couch anymore. And if she does, she likes sitting in the corners, which are now out of view. So, I don't know. I'm gonna try one more time. She might leave. If that is the case, then so be it. High five. Good girl. Yeah, good girl. Okay, that was quite a feat. So if she moves, then I tried. But here is the gorgeous Sandy. Yeah. So this is the case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was 49 years old when she disappeared from a bike ride near her home in Salida, Colorado. And she disappeared on the 10th of May 2020. Salida, Colorado is absolutely gorgeous. It's mountainous, there's a lot of outdoor activities, and I can almost hear you sighing over what I'm about to say. But Salida was the type of place where it was very safe and nobody locked their doors. Can we normalise locking our damn doors? And there is a reward of $200,000 for the safe return of Suzanne Morphew. $100,000 was put forward by Barry Morphew, her husband, and it was matched by a family friend. What I do want to say is authorities haven't identified any persons of interest or any suspects at this point, not formally at least. So let's get into the disappearance. Suzanne disappeared on Sunday the 10th of May, but this wasn't just any Sunday, it was actually Mother's Day, and she was a mother of two. Herself and her husband Barry had two daughters, Macy and Mallory. This whole family, by the way, ridiculously gorgeous, but that's neither here nor there. Suzanne was reported missing that evening actually, so it was around 5:45, and a neighbour called the police and told them that Suzanne had gone out on a bike ride and that she hadn't come back. And I know that sounds kind of weird, like how did she even notice that she didn't come back from her bike ride? Like I would never notice if my neighbour didn't come back for like a month from a bike ride. I'm sorry to anyone who lives near me, but that sounds so bad, but it's just how it is. I just wouldn't notice. But what actually happened anyway was the Morphews contacted the neighbour and asked her to check on Suzanne in the house. So obviously the Morphews were out that day, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But of course, what's kind of going on in my mind is, well, how do we even know if she was on a bike ride? Like, if the whole family had been out all day, which they had been, how did they even know that she went on a bike ride? And this actually came from Barry Morphew himself, because he had asked the neighbour on the phone, could you go and check on Suzanne? The neighbour went and checked and said she's not there, so she went back to her house, and then Barry said, could you check if her bike is there? Because she normally goes out for a bike ride on a Sunday. So the neighbour went back and looked for the bike, but the bike wasn't there. And that's why we know, or that's why we think, Suzanne was out on a bike ride that day, because that was her routine. But what I will say before I move on from that, yes, that makes sense, but nobody technically saw her leave on a bike that morning. So it's just something to be aware of. Not even the neighbour who called the police had technically seen her on the bike. Alright, so let's get into the timeline. And I have tried my very best to put this in an order where it makes sense. There are a lot of things that it does make sense to kind of jump back and forth, and I've tried to minimize that to the best of my ability. First of all, that weekend Macy and Mallory had been on a camping trip in Idaho, which is a long way away. And Barry was in Denver working. Now, Denver is 150 miles away from where they lived. And initially the story was that Barry was doing some kind of training as part of being a volunteer firefighter. However, when the county fire chief was asked to confirm this, he claimed that there were no trainings going on at the time due to COVID, because this is May 2020, everything had really kicked off with all that. So there's a bit of confusion here over something that there shouldn't really be confusion over, but it turned out that Barry was actually in Denver on a landscaping job. And a co-worker had reported that the hotel room Barry had been staying in smelled very strongly of chlorine. As well as the fact that Andy Mormon, who's actually Suzanne's brother, said that the Morphew's home smelled very strongly of chlorine around this time. So that's kind of strange, but I don't want to hop on any bandwagon or anything just yet. So law enforcement wanted people to hold on to their security footage from their homes from the 8th of May, just 2 days before Suzanne was reported missing, to the 12th of May, 2 days after. So Barry had been working most of that weekend from the 8th of May, the Friday. He was doing some kind of landscaping job, like I said, and he was also working on this site on the Saturday morning as well, until 11 a.m. The original plan was to work all day Saturday, but Barry's co-worker said that around 11 a.m. he said he had to go home and make the wife happy with some hiking and biking. This co-worker also said that Barry seemed weird that day. Fast forward to 4 p.m. on Saturday, Suzanne and Barry were seen in Salida getting a sandwich. I don't know where this report actually came from. I've heard people speaking about it, but I don't know like the direct source. Like, was it CCTV that they were seen on, or was it an actual person who saw them with their own eyes? If so, do we believe this person? I don't know. But as far as I know, that is the last time that we've seen Suzanne alive. Now, the next we hear from Suzanne is actually around midnight, when Suzanne starts friending a bunch of random men from Indiana on Facebook. Well, they weren't totally random. She grew up in Indiana and she knew these men from growing up with them, but like, why now at the age of 49 are you randomly friending a bunch of men from a whole other state at midnight? And I mean, I say Suzanne, what I really mean is someone on Suzanne's Facebook. Right, because like there is a difference. 4 a.m. the following morning, this is the next part that we know for sure, is Barry was outside walking around and texting people, trying to assemble a crew for the landscaping job that they had to do that day. But also, according to Barry, the last he saw of Suzanne was at 5 a.m. when he left for work, and obviously he didn't speak to her because she was still asleep. So that doesn't really add up, unless he literally got up, got dressed, went outside, walked around, texted people to assemble a crew, and then went back home and got back into bed for like less than an hour, which seems like a bit of a stretch. This is what I mean with the rumors and discrepancies and everything in this case. Like, these are very simple things. Like, they shouldn't be such massive question marks. But technically, because the last time anyone saw or heard from Suzanne was Saturday, we think, because them getting a sandwich, a lot of people think that something actually happened to Suzanne on Saturday, or the night of Saturday leading into the early hours of Sunday morning. Something about that co-worker that Barry had been working with on Saturday, she had also been speaking to him on Sunday morning on the phone, and she said that he sounded like he had had the worst night of his life. And those are her exact words. Nancy Grace also did a segment on this case, and she stated that it's kind of strange that the same weekend their two daughters were away on a camping trip, Suzanne went missing, insinuating that this was maybe a window of opportunity for the remaining family member, Barry, to, who knows. And she's not wrong, but let's also still err on the side of caution, because we don't really know. Like, it could just be a coincidence. So yes, I am sorry to throw a load of sketchy Barry related stuff at you from the get-go, but those simply are the details of the timeline. Okay, so let's get into the searches a little bit. On Sunday night, the day Suzanne disappeared, her bike was actually found. It was found on a bridge near the Morphew's home. In the days following this, Barry was seen routing through one of the public bins in the area, and he said he was looking for Suzanne's baby blue helmet. Kind of strange place to be looking for it, but we'll let that slide for a moment. But this helmet was actually found a few days later. I believe it was found on the side of a road. Also, to do with the searches, there were a number of areas that cadaver dogs alerted to, but obviously none of this led to any sign of Suzanne. Alright, 1 week after Suzanne went missing, well, two strange things happened. Maybe it's a bit mean to call it strange. I suppose I'll leave that up to you to decide. But one of these things was Barry released a video to the public on Facebook. He was pleading, saying that if anyone saw Suzanne, please ring in, let them know. And also if someone had her, could they please bring her back? No questions asked, like he just wanted her back.
If anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
And some people believe that he did such a short video because there's less of it to tear apart and pull pieces out of. And people kind of have been swaying it in a way that this was a way for him to show his concern without implementing himself and tripping himself up. And honestly, because it is so short, it is kind of difficult to tell if it's genuine or not. I'd love to know your specific thoughts on that video, so leave that in the comments below. But what I will say is, how are you supposed to act? If you were put in that scenario, let's say you are 100% innocent and your spouse disappears, vanishes into thin air, and you are confused, heartbroken, you don't know, should you be grieving, you don't know if they're alive or dead, like, and on top of that, you know that people are going to look to you immediately. That's going to make you pretty nervous. While on one side I'm like, I don't know. The other side I'm like, okay, hang on, let's give him the benefit of the doubt for a moment, because he knows that anything he does put out, he is going to be torn apart and scrutinized, and every little bit of his behavior looked at. So it's going to be pretty difficult to show up authentically. And I'm not surprised at this part, but since then Barry has been pretty quiet because he has been portrayed in a pretty negative way. But according to Barry, and honestly according to family friends as well, Suzanne was truly the love of his life. Your thoughts on all that are up to you. I certainly have my thoughts, and I'll get to those in a little bit because we're not done. The other weird thing that happened about a week after Suzanne disappeared is there was a check-in on her Facebook. And I don't mean like someone logged into it, but I mean a public thing came up saying that she checked in to Alexandria, Indiana. So first of all, who did this? If it was Suzanne, isn't that a little strange that she's literally disappeared for a whole week? Her family don't even know she's alive, and now she's just like, hey everyone, I'm in Indiana. I find that unusual. If it wasn't Suzanne, who was it then? Was this an attempt for someone to try and throw people off the scent? Or did it maybe have something to do with one of those guys that she friended from Indiana? Actually, just thinking about her friending all those guys, that could be a potential motive for a jealous husband to maybe do something. Look, it's not known obviously, but it's just definitely something that needs to be considered. Andy Mormon though, Suzanne's brother, does believe that her Facebook was being manipulated and that it was not her. Okay, now I know I've been hinting at Barry theories but there is more that I have to add here. And honestly, like, I'm sure you can probably tell the reluctance in my voice. I don't like instantly jumping on theories about the spouse, because I put myself in that scenario and I'm like, well, if I was 100% innocent and everyone is tearing apart every little detail of my behavior and how I'm acting and all this stuff, when really all I want to do is grieve and try and figure it out and all this stuff. I just think it would be so incredibly heartbreaking for everybody in the world to be thinking that you had something to do with your husband or wife's disappearance. So I genuinely don't like to jump on these theories straight away, but there's a lot of sketchiness around them, I have to admit it. We've already seen some of it in this video because it kind of ties into every single part of this case, and maybe that fact alone is pretty telling. But unfortunately, there is more. So first of all, he was rumoured to have a mistress at the time of Suzanne's disappearance, and like he had been with this woman for a while beforehand. Apparently this unknown woman was 29 years old, so like 20 plus years younger than him. But I do want to put the emphasis on rumoured. Apparently this woman was questioned by the police and nothing really came of that, but it does kind of sound like she exists if this woman was apparently questioned by the police. He's also rumoured to have a girlfriend now, and I don't know if this girlfriend is the same woman as the mistress, but either way. Now, Barry also has refused to take a lie detector test, and he's willing to participate in interviews, but not if they're recorded. And you could kind of look on this either way. Like on one side, I'm like, I totally see why he would do that. He doesn't want to be scrutinized any more than he already has been. On the other side, it's like, well, what have you got to hide? You know, if you are a totally innocent person, are you not just going to want to be out there as much as possible so that people can see that you are a genuinely authentic person and that you are innocent? Who knows? Again, let me know what your thoughts are on that. And then there's also the fact that Barry has kind of led the way in terms of like the investigation, you know, telling people what to think and what not to think, and telling people where to look and where not to look. For example, nobody even really considered Suzanne to be on a bike ride until he suggested to the neighbor, is her bike there? And it wasn't there, and that's why it was like, oh well, she must have been on a bike ride. And then a few days later, or not even a few days later, a few hours later, her bike was found. He was also seen looking for a baby blue helmet, and then the helmet was found a few days later. Some people believe the helmet was actually placed. I don't know what, I don't know, but you know, maybe not. Another thing is he mentions this area of where not to look because it's been so thoroughly investigated and searched, but that ended up being the exact area where cadaver dogs hit on a scent. Now obviously nothing came out of that particular hit, but this definitely raises some eyebrows. Why is he trying to keep people away from this particular area? And also in this area is the Morphew's house, by the way. There's also the initial confusion about his whereabouts. Why was the initial story that he was on some training for firefighting and then that training ended up not existing? Like, there shouldn't be inconsistencies with things like that. It's like, where were you? Okay, cool. Why the question marks? Why the discrepancies? Also, I do think it's important to mention what Suzanne's brother Andy thinks about this whole thing. Andy believes that his sister was murdered. And not only that, but he does believe that this is some kind of domestic dispute. According to him, he hopes that Barry wasn't involved, but he says that all the evidence just points towards him. And everything does seem to lead to Barry. Now, Barry did publicly respond to this and saying that Andy had no idea what he was talking about and he was hardly ever even in contact with Suzanne. And okay, this could be the response of a totally innocent man trying to defend himself, or it could be the response of someone that's trying to deflect. Honestly, I'd be really interested to know how often Andy actually was in contact with Suzanne, because if he was always in touch, I think it makes sense as to why he's so sure about Barry. Because why lie unless you've got something to hide? Okay, let's get into some other theories, because obviously the main theory in this case is that Barry knows more than he's letting on. But there are definitely other avenues to be considered if we want to be any kind of objective about it. Firstly, there were mountain lions in this area, and if Suzanne had gone out for a bike ride, that's definitely something that could have been her fate. And I'm sorry to be morbid here, but if a mountain lion had eaten her, well, there may not be that much left to show for it. And this is the theory that Barry has actually pushed quite a bit. However, if this had been the case, a mountain lion wouldn't just attack and then eat the prey there. They would have dragged the body for 50 to 450 feet before eating them. And if that was the case, they would have left tracks in the dirt and definitely some kind of trail of blood or something, none of which were found. Now, Barry has responded to this saying that it had been raining that day, so if there were any tracks that they got messed up. And I just find it a bit unusual that he says that. It seems like an instance of, well, why is he trying to back up this theory? Is he trying to keep our attention away from other possibilities? Is that what it is? Or okay, another theory is that Suzanne was abducted. Now, this theory could go one of two ways. It could be the kind of thing where she was abducted and is being held somewhere alive, but it could also lead to her being killed by someone. Maybe one of these men from Indiana. Seems like a bit of a stretch, but maybe it's worth mentioning. Or maybe Suzanne was being stalked by someone. She was stunning. And not that that makes it okay, but maybe she did have some kind of secret admirer who was just that little bit too much into her. There's not exactly a whole lot of evidence to suggest this, but again, has to be considered. Another theory is that Suzanne just up and left. This technically could also be linked to the men in Indiana, you know, with the whole check-in on Facebook in Indiana a week later. Did she just have some other guy on the side and like wanted to move away and be with him? Was there someone that she just wanted to start a new life with? Or did she just leave for no other reason but to start fresh herself? If that were the case, though, it does seem unusual that she would leave her bike and her helmet behind. Like, she's already leaving her husband and her two daughters. Is she really not going to take, like, the one hobby that everyone knows that she has? Was she just given that up too? It just also seems a little far-fetched. Now, something that could potentially tap into a number of these theories is the fact that the river that surrounded the Morphew's home was a pretty intense river. It moved very fast, it was known for whitewater rafting, as well as the fact that at this time of year when she went missing, the snow would be melting, so there would be more water in the river. So if someone was to dump a body into the river, it likely wouldn't settle. It would probably be pushed along with the current. And I'm not sure what theory I want to put that with, but I do think it's important to consider, honestly. But I really wonder what the two daughters think of this case, particularly surrounding Barry, who is their father. Do they think that he had something to do with it, or is this still like a happy family kind of situation? But that leads me to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. If you've gotten to this point in the video and you haven't clicked off, and you're not subscribed, I mean, you might as well go ahead and subscribe. And you might as well go ahead and hit the little bell so you don't miss any of my uploads as well. Because my my upload schedule has been a little like touch and go, and there's a lot going on at the moment. I have kind of mentioned on my Twitter and stuff that like I'm not sure how good I'm going to be at being consistent just for the next month or so ish. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. For more true crime content, I am posting quite a lot on my TikTok, which is katephilpott_YT, and that's also the same handle as my Instagram and my Twitter, where I kind of post updates and also just me being me. Have I been this off center this whole time, or am I just sitting on my left butt cheek? Wow. On that note, goodbye, good night, good morning, have a great day, have a great life. Oh my god, stop talking, Kate. Bye. See you next time. Bye, guys.